egomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Serber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Serber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Johnny Robertson. We're here live on What Does the Bible Say? We hope that everybody is actually aware. See if I can get my last part of my business done. We hope that everybody is aware of the fact that we are actually continuing our discussion tonight. I'll be coming on with, as a matter of fact, Larry Serber will be coming on in just a minute. And we'll continue our discussion in regard to the ideas of whether evolution is true, whether God is involved in the design of our world and our universe. Can you trust that God's Word is in fact the means by which we find our way back to God or find our way to God? And so, we have a lot of ground to cover, and we hope tonight that you are in a position where you can actually watch our show. One of the things we want to do tonight is we want to always tell you about where you can be located or where you can find us. 823 Starling Avenue is where I meet. That's a building there, by the way. It's not a church. The church actually assembles there 3 times a week, 3 times on Sunday morning, and we assemble on Wednesday night as well. You can see the times there. Also, we want you to know about our internet activity. I'm pretty excited about Bible Says TV activity right now. Bible Says TV has gotten over 200,000 views now, and to us, views are much different than hits, and I wasn't even aware of that. What it basically means is that people are really going there and viewing it versus a hit, and a hit means that you could actually get there by mistake and then move on. So people are certainly watching our Bible Says TV YouTube and our Ustream, What Does the Bible Say with Johnny, and What Does the Bible Say with Johnny 2012, where you can view this debate, this discussion between myself and Larry in its entirety. If you want anything from us, all you have to do is email me at religiousreview@gmail.com, and we'll send you anything that we have available for free. You can get in touch with me, 276-806-2150. And also you can get in touch with Eugene Edwards at 276-806-6922. We're also have other folks that associate with us, and that would be folks over at Eden Church of Christ. They put on a broadcast here at 9 o'clock on this same channel, Word from the Lord with James Oldfield. Those folks meet at 250 The Boulevard in Eden, North Carolina. Also, we want to tell you about the church in Danville, Virginia. They sponsor a program as well. They have a program as well, and it's on Thursday night at 8 o'clock. What does the Bible say? And you can reach Mark McMinnis at 434-770-8412. We're going to ask Larry. We're going to run our debate commercial one more time. And during that time frame, then Larry will come in, and we're going to let him begin tonight, and he'll go for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back in and go for 10 minutes. We'll do this 3 times a piece, which is then going to be an hour. We'll then go into questions that we asked each other, which those questions will go 3 questions each. For that'll be about 20-something minutes. By the time it's all said, 24 minutes. Then we'll open the phone lines, and then we'll finish up with our finishing speech. So run our program, and we'll be right back run our commercial. We'll be right back with Larry Serber.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Serber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it. Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Serber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Serber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Good evening. Happy to be here for the second part of our debate. I always like to say when I come on a debate with anybody that if you've got a old-fashioned VCR tape player like I have, or if you've got some kind of modern TiVo or something, please try to tape this program, because sometimes people will hear the unusual things that I say that they're not used to hearing, and the next day when they're eating breakfast around the county somewhere, they start saying, well, this Mr. Serber said this, or he said that. I would prefer that you be able to go back and look at the tape and see what I actually said, as opposed to what you think you remember me saying. And I want to be held accountable. And the same thing with Johnny. I want you to be able to quote him for what he really said. And I would also like you to get out a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper if you can, because if we get to it, if we have enough time, I'm going to be asking you to go to your Bible and look at some Bible verses. I'll briefly tell you what they say and why I'm bringing them up. But I'd like you, this is what does the Bible say, and a word from the Lord, and religious review, all that. I would like you to be able to look at the Bible and, again, verify that I'm telling you the truth, that the Bible actually says what I'm saying it says. If Johnny doesn't mind, I'd like to take a moment of my time to refer back to something that happened last week with a caller, because I've had a little observation since then. A man called in last week and asked me if I had ever changed my mind. And I laughed and said, of course I have. I used to be religious and now I'm not. And he said, well, why can't a dog change its mind? And I immediately said, well, I think they can. And he said, no, dogs, they're just trained. And I went on and said some things about gorillas speaking sign language and stuff. But anyway, my wife and I have a dog. He was a little puppy, and he started sleeping in the bed with us, and he's grown to be 100 pounds now, but he still sleeps in the bed with us. He jumps up at night and gets between us and at the foot of the bed. And my wife always gets up a lot earlier in the morning than I do, and she takes the dog outside for a few minutes, and then she fixes him his little dog breakfast. And if I'm awake, I will hear him after he eats his breakfast I'll hear the click-clack of his little toenails on our hardwood floors in the hall, and I'll hear him coming back. And if I want to sleep a little longer, I don't want him to be nudging me and licking me and trying to wake me up. I'll fake sleeping. I'll close my eyes and try to breathe very regularly. He jumps up on the bed, and if he sees that he thinks I'm asleep, he won't bother me. He just lies down and curls up and goes to sleep. But if I'm there with my eyes open, he'll come over and start nudging me, trying to push me out of the bed to get me up. So to me, that is proof positive that a dog can change his mind. If he came up with the intention of getting me up but saw I was sleeping and didn't want to disturb me, nobody ever taught him that. I can assure you of that. The man also asked, why do elephants not wear pants? And I think that was so crazy sounding to me, I made some kind of silly, facetious remark. But obviously what I should have said is, elephants don't wear pants because humans are by far the most advanced of all species as far as we know. We're the only ones that build skyscrapers and chainsaws and sports cars, and that's evidence to most people that we are the most highly evolved of all the species. I say as far as we know, because it may be that humans are not as smart as dolphins. Research in the last 25 years has indicated that dolphins have a larger and more complex brain than a human, and their language is amazingly complex. But the main thing is we know that they have a highly evolved conscience, a compassion, because there have been many documented cases with sailors in the Navy and shipwrecks and things where a dolphin will save someone of another species, like a human who is drowning. If a human is drowning, the dolphins will get together and hold them up so they don't drown. So it just may be that dolphins are superior to humans, but why don't they build skyscrapers and sports cars and chainsaws and computers? Well, because they live in the water and they don't have any hands. So maybe our measure of advancement, just what kinds of things they build, may not be correct. Okay, I wanted to discuss Johnny's main thing last week, and this is difficult. If you watched last time, 10 days ago, you probably noticed that Johnny spent a large portion of his time showing a very bad speech that Richard Dawkins made. And I was so upset by it that I just couldn't believe it, because I've been a fan of Richard Dawkins for a long, long time. And I'm going to tell why I admire him just in a minute here. But I was so upset by it that I asked Johnny where he was getting this from, and he told me it was from this book, What's Your Dangerous Idea by John Brockman. So I went home and I got my wife to get on the computer and look it up, and I said, I want it, and I want it right away. And she said, well, it costs $5.60. And how much do you want to pay to spend? How much do you want to spend to get it shipped? I said, I don't care what it costs. She said, well, it's $23.98 to get it overnight. I said, I don't care if it costs $200. I must have it. I'm not going to be able to sleep until I see what's gone crazy with Richard Dawkins. So she ordered it. The next morning, the FedEx man was out there bright and early. I leaped out of bed, went over there, and got the package. It was cardboard. I ripped it open, took the book out, flipped over here to the last 5 pages, which is Richard Dawkins' afterword. And to my surprise, it didn't say anything about this stuff from last week, Basil Fawlty's car and Basil beating it with a tree limb. But it happened that the next night, Johnny called me. And he was telling me that we weren't going to be able to have our debate on Thursday as planned, but we were going to have to move it till tonight because he was with Caleb. And I said, fine. And he asked me if I got the book, and I said, I did. I said, but Johnny, you must have been mixed up. It wasn't there. And he said, no. I didn't say that it was there. I didn't mean that it was there in the afterword. Dawkins had done one of the articles. There's 108 articles by 108 scientists and philosophers here. So I looked through the table of contents and looked at the book and couldn't find that. My wife looked through it. It turned out it wasn't in there. So I don't know where Johnny got that from, but that doesn't really matter because what Johnny showed you last week was absolutely true. I got it off the internet. It's called Richard Dawkins, Let's All Stop Beating Basil's Car. And it has every word that Johnny said. It even ends up with his saying, my dangerous idea is we shall eventually grow out of all this, and it even learn to laugh at it just as we laugh at Basil Fawlty when he beats his car, but I fear it is unlikely I shall ever reach that level of enlightenment. Well, looking for this stuff, I was looking around on the internet. And I really don't like to get my information off blogs on the internet because people can say anything on a blog. They can lie. James Oldfield and I were laughing one time when some lady called in and said she'd seen, somebody had seen Jesus' face on a toasted cheese sandwich, and she said it had to be true because she got it off the internet. And James and I laughed and said, well, it's got to be true, or if it's on the internet, joking. But anyway, there were several preachers that had jumped on this, and I don't blame them, because this really does make Richard Dawkins look stupid to say these things that he said. But this is what I got from Richard Dawkins' website. Richard Dawkins is he's the professor of molecular biology and evolutionary biology at Oxford University in England. He's probably, and I would say without too much doubt, the world's leading biologist today. But he also has a position called Chairman of the Popularization of Science. And so he spends a lot of his time trying to get ideas about science out to people that are not scientists. And this is what he wrote. This was in 2006, the thing that Johnny showed you last week, and this is what he says. I'm just going to read it. The 2005 Edge question was, what is your dangerous idea? An idea that is dangerous not because it is assumed to be false, but because it just might be true. The BBC, that's the British Broadcasting Corporation, called the question fantastically stimulating, like the crack cocaine of the thinking world. The Edge Foundation asked me to speak at its annual banquet in 2006 and to present my own dangerous idea. I said that if pure mechanistic scientists are correct, that to punish a heinous criminal for his crime would be like Basil Fawlty's beating his car for the crime of failure to start. I, of course, caught hell for these remarks, and deservedly so. For though I was speaking to a room full of the most sophisticated minds on the planet, I should have known that my remarks would be taken up by religious bloggers everywhere to prove that atheists like this Dawkins chap would lead us to total anarchy. But it's not enough for an idea to be dangerous. It is not even enough for an idea to be true. It is not even enough for it to be true. The idea must also be good. Galileo's dangerous idea was that the earth was not the center of the universe. Is that it? Okay. I'll continue this when my next 10 minutes comes up.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Serber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Serber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
All right, we appreciate Larry coming in and giving his point of view there, and we hope that everybody is, like he says, taking notes, because we don't want you to quote people. We don't want you to quote either one of us. Actually, we don't want you to take notes. We would rather you video this, and if you want the video from me, all you have to do is just give me a call and or an email at the email that I showed you before, and we'll get it to you for free. I'm going to basically begin tonight by demonstrating that, you know, folks, it seems to me that in the scientific community that there is a constant bravado, if I can put it that way, not necessarily with Larry, but in the scientific realm as a whole. I do a lot of interviews. I try to do a lot of interviews. I can't get anyone to talk to me about science, about evolution. Larry's the first person who has ever been able to, been willing to do it. As you saw on our discussion having to do with Bob Lawson didn't want to discuss anything that had to do with real substantive information, wouldn't tell us where he got his degree, wouldn't give us any kind of information, didn't really want to discuss anything about morals, anything of that nature. I've been to the Natural History Museum, as many of you know. They shut down the Natural History Museum rather than let us go with a scientist, a person who had a PhD in biology. I've caught the paleontologist for the Natural History Museum in Martinsville up at the library at a political function and tried to ask him questions. And he basically started talking about the fact that he was going to, he was saying words like, "You're harassing me, and I've asked you to leave me alone, and you're not interested in the facts." I'm really not interested in the facts. I don't know how it is that he determined that. And so then some of our folks, I think Mark McMinnis talked to him on the inside of the museum. We tried to put that up on YouTube, and the museum complained that we were violating their copyrights. And what I get is that on the one hand, they seem to have lots of answers, but then when you put them under the microscope, you really begin to try to question them in a very detailed and systematic way. Most of the time, that bravado turns into something else. And so tonight, I just want to give you an instance. And one of the things that I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to try my very best to demonstrate to you that the scientific community does not have all of this figured out. They do have a lot of information. There's no doubt about that. And I'm thankful for real science. I'm thankful for verifiable science, especially in the medical field and in the field that has to do with technology and the inventions that we have. Those are great things that science has given us, and that entrepreneurial spirits and individuals who are really trying to think, they have done a lot. And as far as in the world of area having to do with ammunitions and things of that nature. We may not like ammunition, we may not like war and things of that nature, but I am certainly glad that we have a system in place so that persons who do like war and persons who would try to take over our way of life cannot do that without a fight. They realize that. And so all of these things have been given to us as a result of scientific inquiry. But I want to let you listen to a statement that Larry made to Charles last week, and this is the way that he described religious people. Take a listen. Okay, let's see if I can get that to play. All right, I may have to go to another means of getting it to play, and that's fine. We always have a backup plan. And let me let you hear it another way. All right, that was this clip right here. Take a listen.
Think about the Holy Trinity. One thing is three things, and still one thing. And you got God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and Jesus is fully human and He's fully divine. That's kind of like saying 2 + 2 is 4, but sometimes it's 5 because there's a spirit of threeness in 2. It just makes no sense.
All right, Larry Serber here with us tonight.
Okay. Now, Larry basically talked about the Trinity and the way that we juggle numbers around. Let me just say it that way. We might actually let you listen to it again. But before we do, I want to let you listen to a very prominent scientist that Larry Serber, I think, would adhere to. His name is Lawrence Krauss. I, too, like Larry, have read some of the books that we're discussing. I think I have 4 or 5 books now by Richard Dawkins, and have already read many things that Richard Dawkins had to say, as well as Lawrence Krauss. Went out and bought Lawrence Krauss's book. But I want you to notice what Lawrence Krauss says here in a debate with a gentleman named Craig. Take a watch.
2 plus 2 equals 5, my t-shirt says, for extremely large values of 2. Now that's extremely important because, in fact, classical logic, such as 2 plus 2 equals 5, is 4, it can equal 5 as well. Mathematicians and physicists know that for extremely large values of numbers, you have to change the rules.
Okay. Now, I apologize for the graininess of that video. I actually listened to this whole debate in audio, but in video, for some reason or other, they have some grains going on. But this is Lawrence Krauss, and he says 2 plus 2 actually equals 5. So what was so funny in the statement that Larry made really is right back to him. His scientist is saying, well, sometimes you just have to change the rules. And sometimes 2 plus 2 can equal 5. Well, if it's okay to have 2 plus 2 equal 5 in the scientific realm, then what's wrong with what's the big deal about us having a situation in religion where the Trinity actually involves a means of having 1 end up being 3 in some sense? Let's listen to that again.
Think about the Holy Trinity. One thing is 3 things, and still one thing, and you got God the Father, God the Son, the Holy Ghost, and Jesus is fully human and he's fully divine. That's kind of like saying 2 plus 2 is 4, but sometimes it's 5 because there's a spirit of...
Okay, now, really what he was doing, and I'm fine with that, is he was ridiculing our position about the Trinity and saying that we religious people are kind of on the wacky side because sometimes 2 plus 2 can equal 5. Well, guess what? In the scientific realm, unless he wants to throw out Lawrence Krauss, which I don't think he will, because Lawrence Krauss right now is going around with Richard Dawkins, and they are discussing what they actually know about the universe. And here's Lawrence Krauss saying that sometimes you have to change the rules, and depending on how large your numbers of 2 are, 2 plus 2 can equal 5. So really, who does have everything figured out? Now, here's another slide, or another thing that was said on the show having to do with Charles the other night. And that is that Larry says that we can't explain how. The people in the realm of the Bible, and I don't think any of these are going to play. Yeah, it is.
1 pound. 2 and 1. I don't think they can really answer some of my arguments about, like, how did God blow on dust and, make a man with a trillion of these complex human cells. That's a single human cell. God just blew on dust and all of a sudden popped up a man with a trillion human cells. And, I just feel like that they don't really have answers when I...
Okay.
2 and...
Now, we don't have answers in regard to where the universe came from, and this business about God just blowing into man, and that somehow or other blowing into the dust and man coming out, and that somehow or other is a problem for us. Well, I want you to listen to the way it is described by Richard Dawkins and Mr. Krauss. First of all, let me give you a BBC documentary and listen to what science says. Now, Richard Dawkins is actually sitting here. Take a listen.
According to the modern version of the Big Bang model, the entire observable universe exploded into existence between 13 and 14 billion years ago.
Some scientists will tell you that time itself began in the Big Bang.
Now, here's my statement about that. All of that business that you're hearing there, they can't prove any of that. They weren't there. They don't know that. They don't even agree on it. Take a listen to what is being said by the two, Krauss and Dawkins, in regard to how the world started.
I've made some notes just in case, but we'll see where this goes. Now, the title for this evening is Something from Nothing, which sounds quite self-indulgent, since it's also the subtitle of my new book. But it's not completely for that reason. In fact, something for nothing goes, I think, and we think beyond that. And I wanted to start, Richard, by asking you sort of, in the context of evolution, what something from nothing means to you.
Charles Darwin solved one of the greatest riddles that the human mind has ever solved, which is how you get something from nothing, in the sense of how you get the immense complexity and diversity and beauty and elegance of life, and perhaps above all, how you get the powerful illusion of design that life shows, starting not quite from nothing, but starting from extreme...
Okay, any way you slice it, it is from nothing, and the name of his book is Something from Nothing. Okay, we'll go to our commercial, and we're going to try, I meant to try to give you 10 seconds there, Eugene. We'll run a commercial, and Larry will be back to give his next 10 minutes.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Okay, before I continue with the thing from Richard Dawkins I was reading before, I would like to respond. I have no earthly idea what Krauss is talking about, that sometimes 2 + 2 = 5. That's senseless to me. Maybe he's got an explanation. I have no idea. I want to start back where Dawkins had said he caught hell for these remarks that Johnny showed last week. He said, and most deservedly so, for though I was speaking to a room full of the most sophisticated minds on the planet, I should have known that my remarks would be taken up by religious bloggers everywhere to prove that atheists like this Dawkins chap would lead us to total anarchy. But it is not enough for an idea to be dangerous. It is not even enough for an idea to be true. It must also be good. Galileo's dangerous idea was that the Earth was not the center of the solar system. It was certainly dangerous. It almost got him murdered by the Catholic Church. But it was true. And it must have been good as well, after all, because a few years ago the Pope admitted that Galileo was right. Unfortunately, it was 400 years too late to do Galileo any good. Professor Roger Shank's dangerous idea was entitled, No More Teachers, Dirty Looks. In it, Shank suggests that school is bad for kids, that it makes kids hate learning because it reminds them of the horrors of boring lectures and tedious long homework assignments. He suggests that we just stop having schools. Does Dr. Shanks really believe this? Of course not. After all, he's a college professor. And while he does believe we should make schools a lot less boring, he would never seriously suggest that we should actually tear down our schools. This whole project was a thought experiment. As for my own dangerous idea, do I believe it? And this is the key. As for my own dangerous idea, do I believe it? Not for a moment. I believe, along with Sigmund Freud, that highly evolved organisms have a superego, what we would call a conscience. That little voice which tells us not to hurt another person's feelings, not to murder another person, not to commit adultery with another man's wife, no matter how much we may wish to. And this conscience is most assuredly not implanted in us by God. It developed in and resides in our brains. Humans, most of us at any rate, have a conscience, and chimps and gorillas have a conscience too, because they have told us they do. Finally, I would like to say that I have a daughter, Juliet, who is the light of my life. Were she to be raped, not only would I insist that her rapist spend the rest of his life in prison where he could never rape another girl, but in my darkest part, I'd wish to torture him. The next time you read that Richard Dawkins says we are no more responsible for our actions than Basil Fawlty's car is for not cranking, tell them that yes, Dawkins said it, but he does not really believe it. This was Richard Dawkins, January 20th, 2007. Okay, so you know, as I said, I was very upset because I admire Dawkins, and I'm going to tell you why. He's a polymath. That means he knows an enormous amount about so many things that it just brings me to my knees. He's obviously an expert on molecular biology, but he's an expert on chemistry and physics and geology and astronomy and plate tectonics and computers, and it's not just science. The man knows the history of the mythology of the Maoris of New Zealand, the Aboriginal people of Australia, many of the African tribes, the Norse people of the Scandinavian country, the Native Americans of North America. He's like a walking encyclopedia. That's what the term polymath means. It means a man or woman with encyclopedic knowledge. So that's why I love him. He knows so much. He knows history and politics, and I've read his books, and I love his books. I would like to do something that's going to sound very unusual, but I would like to make a direct appeal to a person. Her name is Sheila Richards. And Mrs. Richards, I know you call and have been calling James Oldfield and Johnny Robertson and Mark McManus for quite some time. And you have said that you're of the holiness faith, and that you do believe in laying on hands and healing, and you believe in speaking in unknown tongues. And the other day you called into Mark McManus and were telling him this, and you said you get so confused. I've heard you say many times you get so confused. You get so confused. You had your holiness preacher, and now you don't get to go to the church as much anymore, but you try to watch Johnny and James and them, and you just get torn between your holiness views and the Church of Christ views from the New Testament. And I would like to say this to you from the bottom of my being. Sheila, you are confused because of the Bible, because of your preacher, and because of these Church of Christ preachers. And I beg you, I absolutely beg you to get this book right here. It's called The Magic of Reality. It's Richard Dawkins' latest book. And if you will get this book and read it, just take your time and read it slowly and carefully. It's not complicated. It doesn't have higher math in it. But get this book and read it. And when you finish it, put it away for about a week or two and think about it. Then take it out again. Read it again slowly and carefully. And I really believe you will finally understand that you're going to continue to be confused as long as you look at that Bible and listen to these preachers. Because, Sheila, God is the author of confusion. I know that Johnny and James will constantly be saying, God is not the author of confusion. That to me sounds like BP, British Petroleum, always saying the Gulf's not still oily and the shrimp are tastier than ever. If you just keep saying it over and over. But I don't believe in God. But I don't see how anybody could look at the God, Yahweh of the Bible, and not see the confusion and contradiction and completely almost random ideas. And I was going to say this too, Sheila. If you don't have the money to buy this book, this copy right here was $29.99. I also have it on audio CDs, which cost more. But if you don't have the money to buy this book, get in touch with James Oldfield or Johnny Robertson, and they'll give you my home phone number. And you can call me. I will get your mailing address, and I will buy a copy for you, and I will mail it to you. That's how much it means to me, because I've watched you struggling and suffering with these guys for a long time. And I know Johnny's kind of banned you from calling him on the program. He wants to meet with you at your home or something. But if you would please get this and read this, I don't mind buying you the book. I'm not wealthy, but I'm comfortable, and I can easily afford to buy you a book. Do that for me. And then maybe in a few months I can hear you call into some of these shows and say you read this book and it makes a lot more sense than Johnny Robertson led you to believe. Okay, I wanted to ask a question. Of all you people that, I don't care if you are in the Church of Christ or if you are in the Baptist Church or the Methodist Church, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, Catholic, maybe you're Jewish, I don't care. I want to ask you this. Do you believe Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse and had a long conversation with the angel Gabriel? Think about that for a moment. Do you believe Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse and had a long conversation with the angel Gabriel? I'm guessing you're saying no. But if you lived over in Nigeria or Afghanistan or Iraq or Iran, you might believe it. I also wanted to say this. When I was on with Charles Rourke the other night in Martinsville, I said that I had planned to quote a country song by Randy Travis, because it so well sums up my idea about religion, that you're not going to have any life but this one, and if you waste your time arguing about whether to have a piano in church and studying, you're missing out on a lot. And since this is the only life you have and you're going to die, why not live life the best you can? Live a good life and help other people to live a good life and get wiser and smarter. Anyway, Randy Travis has this song called The Hole. And I don't have it written down here, but it's something like this. You better enjoy the only life you've been given. Because when you're in the ground and cold, then it's too late to start living. And you won't be able to dig out of the hole. And I thought that was a great thing to say, my view, that this is the only life we have and don't be counting on heaven. And then the very day I wrote that down, my goodness, Randy Travis walked into a convenience store drunk and naked, demanding cigarettes. Johnny might say that was a sign from God that I was really messing up here. But anyway, I just wanted to put that idea out there that Randy Travis had a song that kind of agreed with my view. Is that my time?
10 seconds.
Okay.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Serber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Serber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
All right, thank you, Larry, and I'd like to respond to his statement. I also have the book, Magic of Reality, and on page 23, it actually says, talking about the explanation that religious people give, and he says that when we talk about supernatural, he says this, because anything supernatural must be, by definition, it must be beyond the reach of our natural explanation. It must be beyond the reach of science and well-established, tried and tested scientific method that has been responsible for the huge advances in knowledge we have enjoyed over the last 400 years or so. Now, in the context of that statement, he's saying that when a person in religion says that it's supernatural, that they're basically saying it is beyond our reach. And we really don't know anything about it, so we put it in the realm of supernatural, and it's kind of like we become untouchable. Well, I want to let you listen to what Larry said about science and the things having to do with the universe. And what we're thinking about is beyond your understanding. Take a listen. Let me get one of these to play. Let's see here just a minute.
Come to your senses. You've been.
I don't know the origin of life. I'm just saying there are things that indicate to me that these things happen. I'm just saying you don't have any evidence for a mind existing outside of space.
Wait a minute. You made I think that was a very great thing that you just said. You don't know, but you claim that I don't know because you don't know. Is that right?
Well, I don't know everything about it, but I have a lot of evidence that convinces me to lean in a certain direction. There is no evidence that a mind exists outside of
Let's make one step. Okay, now, in that short clip, he said he doesn't know. And guess what? I read this book, and neither does Richard Dawkins. Now, folks, he talked about Richard Dawkins knowing about the Maoris. I lived for 7 years in the Pacific. I visited these islands. I actually worked with Maoris and indigenous people in these particular islands. I have one of the hardest books to get, Winds of Change, which is a book about anthropology of these people out there. I know a lot about them too. But one thing neither one of us knows is how is it they got in those places. And just because Richard Dawkins goes around and says he knows a lot of things, what he said in this book is that he really doesn't know, nor does his colleague know. And I want to bring us back to what they were saying when I went off. Listen to the polymath the two polymaths here, we'll just both give them both that title and listen to what they say about the universe.
Getting something from nothing, Charles Darwin gives us all confidence. Charles Darwin showed that what must have seemed the most difficult problem of getting something from nothing was soluble. He solved it, and his successors have been simply fleshing out his explanation.
Charles Darwin solved something from nothing? Have you ever heard anything more ridiculous? Well, that's what they say about us. When we talk about getting something for nothing, they say, well, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. Let me let you listen to a colleague of ours, Kyle Budd, a member of the church, who was debating Dan Barker, and listen to his conclusion as he talks about what atheists say about us, and then turn around and say the exact same thing, and then call us ridiculous. Take a listen.
In essence, what we're saying along those lines is this, and I've got a couple of little things. Okay, here we go. We're saying it's ignorant and superstitious to believe that God made everything out of nothing. Oh, it's logical and scientific to believe that nothing made everything out of nothing.
How about that? It's ignorant and superstitious for us to say that God made everything out of nothing. But it's okay for them to say that matter, let me just get exactly how he said that, because I know how Krauss said it. He says nothing came from nothing.
Believe that God made everything out of nothing. Oh, it's logical and scientific to believe that nothing made everything out of nothing.
So nothing made everything out of nothing. You know, when they actually start their definitions, they have no clue whatsoever as to how the earth started, the world started, the cosmos started. And they basically say that nothing was there. And Klaus now has come up with this idea. He's the writer of this book, A Universe from Nothing. How scientific is that? Nothing out there, and now we've got 13.5 billion years ago, something actually came out of nothing. Well, he actually begins to define how that happened. There was nothing, and somehow or other matter and antimatter cancel each other out, and they blink in and out of existence, and all of a sudden a single cell came into the world, and as a result of that, isn't that astounding? A single cell came from nothing. It just popped out of the universe. Don't let these people fool you. That is just as confusing as anything anybody else has ever said. It is just as confusing. It's just as improbable, if you want to get down to it, as God. I actually think that the idea of somebody intelligent producing something is a lot more plausible than antimatter and matter canceling each other out and blinking in and out of existence, and then finally, poof, a single cell came into being. Let's listen to Dawkins as he has to defend himself. This is a debate that he had in Australia. Take a listen.
A very old question. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century was asking this same question. He said there must have been a time when no physical things existed, but something can't come from nothing. That was his view. It's just been repeated by us.
Something can come from nothing, and that's what physicists are now telling us. I could give you
Something does come from nothing, and that's what physicists are now telling us. Can you tell me, please, where was a physicist when nothing came from nothing? They weren't back there. They have no proof. How do you define nothing? How do you dissect nothing? How do you view nothing? How do you take nothing apart and look into nothing and determine that something came out of nothing? I mean, do you see how ridiculous this really is? See, this is what we call, this is not polymath, this is sophistry. This is when you end up trying to present yourself to be so smart that you can actually stand there and say to somebody, you know what we know? 13 billion years ago we weren't here, but physicists like Klaus, who says that if you get enough numbers, he actually had a shirt on that said 2 + 2 = 5. If you get enough 2's that are big enough, you can actually add 2 + 2 and get 5. And then Klaus comes along and says, now that I've convinced you that 2 + 2 is 5, I tell you what, I also want to convince you that nothing came from nothing. And Charles Darwin, who was really not a very smart individual at all, I haven't heard Larry say anything about Charles Darwin being a polymath, and I hope that he does, because I have Charles Darwin's credentials on my computer basically to show you Charles Darwin was not an educated man. Charles Darwin was somebody that these individuals wouldn't even let on the stage with them today if he were alive. He was an individual who didn't figure out anything, really. He came up with a theory that he couldn't even prove as a result of visiting an island called the Galapagos Islands. He did not figure out all the answers. The very idea that somebody in the early 1800s figured out all the ideas. Do you know that Charles Darwin didn't even know that genes existed? His ideas, many of which this man, I've heard him on record say that he denies, that he is not for. These individuals do not have things figured out. And folks, tonight, it just goes on and on. The very idea that we would sit here tonight and say that these individuals have things figured out. Now, let me address what Larry did with the statement about his dangerous idea. Now, this is really what I like about Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins writes an idea in which he actually puts forth his dangerous idea, and then he turns around and says, I didn't mean it. I don't believe it. He actually lays out this very scientific idea about the mechanization of mankind. I actually have in both his book and Klaus's book, in Darwin's book on the intelligent design, he talks about the fact that the mechanism of man, the idea that man is mechanical, came all the way back from Bacon, that he's the one that kind of started and introduced this, and that we're simply machines. I've heard Larry Serber himself say that we are, in fact, he followed along with the polymath, saying that we're just gene machines. Each and every one of us is simply here to let our genes replicate. Well, Richard Dawkins takes that a step further, and he puts it on the Edge website, and he writes this whole deal about how it is that he doesn't believe that we ought to be held responsible for the things that we do, that we ought not to have retribution, that we ought not to have tit for tat, any of that, and that all comes from a mixed up idea of the Bible. You know, folks, I wonder, when we get down to it, how is it that we are to get our morals? That's what it's going to come down to tonight. I believe that I have Richard Dawkins in a position tonight that he can't wiggle out of. A very straightforward position that he's going to put forth before the night's over. That I don't think Larry is going to in any way want to stay in the same, I don't know what to say. Sometimes we just say in a metaphorical way, politics makes funny bedfellows. I don't think that he's going to want to stay in the bed with this individual, as they say. Because his position about morals, and I wonder about Larry's position about morals. I mean, Larry talks a very moralistic way, but how are his real morals? Let's go to our commercial, and then we'll let him come back.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Surber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Surber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say I really must admit I don't know for sure about origins, about how non-living molecules were able to replicate for sure. But I do know that we do have cells. And I know when Johnny was just 4 weeks old in his mother's womb, he looked just like a salamander with a tail. I know things change. And I also know that Richard Dawkins has enormous admiration for Charles Darwin. I think Johnny kind of led you to believe he doesn't. I was just jogging this afternoon and listening to the tapes of The God Delusion, a Richard Dawkins book from a few years ago, and he was going on and on about how unbelievably brilliant Darwin was and how his ideas were so amazing. But I would like to say this. Johnny has had a habit in the past. I know he was playing something of me calling his show. Johnny has had the unfortunate habit of shouting people down sometimes. I called him one time and I was going to say, well, how do you think you're going to keep living after your brain rots? By what mechanism? And I started saying something about simple things like hydrogen atoms, and I said hydrogen atoms are identical everywhere in the universe. And I said, Johnny, a hydrogen atom in the bone of your elbow is identical to a hydrogen atom on the sun. And Johnny said, how do you know? And I started to say something. He said, how do you know? Answer the question. Just shouting me down. Have you ever been to the sun? How do you know? Have you ever been to the sun? Answer the question. Well, it's too bad Johnny did that. Because if he hadn't been so eager to shout me down, he might have learned something, because I would have told him we'd known for 100 years there was hydrogen in the sun because of the spectroscope. You shine light from anything that's burning through a prism, it breaks it out into the electromagnetic spectrum, and there's a barcode on it. Black lines, or sometimes colored lines on black, that tell us whether there's sodium there, hydrogen, or what. We've proven. In fact, we discovered helium on the sun long before we discovered helium on the earth. There's a whole world out there that you can learn by science if you don't feel desperate to shout people down. Now, this is what I think Johnny Robertson does, and he's good at it. I think he is so desperate because that Bible, he's bet all his chips in the gambling casino of life on the Bible. Between that front cover and that back cover, it's got to be golden because his God dictated it, and every word in it is true. And so Johnny is so desperate to keep it keep being true. As I said last week, he gets a trowel and a bucket of plaster, and every time there's a crack, like two contradictory things in the Bible about gospel writers saying a little something about Jesus' resurrection, or Judas Iscariot hanging himself and then bursting his guts out, Johnny's plastering away as hard as he can. And this is the way I think Johnny operates. I don't think he means to be a bad person, but just like he shouted me down when I could have told him about the spectroscope if he would have been quiet for a minute, I think Johnny does this. He's so desperate to have the Bible be all true that when things start to scare him a little bit, he's afraid that if we let kids start saying, well, maybe the earth is more than 10,000 years old, if they start doing that, maybe the next thing they'll know is say, well, thou shalt not kill doesn't mean anything. In other words, I think he's thinking it's like a gateway drug. If we let somebody slip through and get their nose through the door, it's going to all fall apart. So this is what Johnny does. And see if this doesn't make sense to you. It's like this. Johnny will tell you what a great pistol shot he is. And you'll go out 50 yards from the barn, and Johnny cocks his pistol, pow, shoots the barn. He goes up with his buckets of paint, finds the bullet hole, and paints the bullseye right around it and says, see there, right in the center. In other words, he seems to make everything go the way he wants it to go. I cannot imagine that Johnny has actually read this whole book. I'd like to give him a test on it right now, because I've listened to this book on audio tape about 11 or 12 times now, and it just stuns me. It knocks me out. I can't believe any person could read this whole book and not be impressed with most of it. Now, he's picked a little thing here and there that he's attacking. If he would attack his Bible like he attacks Richard Dawkins, whew, that would be a sight. The sparks would really be flying. Okay, I had another thing written down here. I don't know if Johnny even saw this, because when I left the Martinsville studio the other night, I got home and I had been taping the shows, and I watched Mark McMinnis's program. They had graciously let Charles and me have some time they were paying for, but Mark did the last little bit. And Mark made a statement. He was trying to prove that the Bible had pre-scientific knowledge. He said, the Bible writers knew the earth was round, and he cited that it says here in the circle of the earth, and he says it's in the compass of the earth. Well, I'm sorry, Mark, but a circle and a compass are not a sphere. A sphere is like a basketball. And I know good and well the Bible writers didn't know about the spherical earth, and they didn't even know what caused day and night, because God somehow let 3 days and nights go by before he thought of making the sun. We all know now that day and night's because the earth rotates and faces the sun and then faces away from the sun. So Mark came up with something about, well, they said you couldn't have light without the sun. What about the electric light bulb? Mark, are you really saying that God invented the electric light bulb back then before Edison? I don't even know what you were saying. But another thing, he went on to say, in 1492, when Columbus sailed, everybody thought the earth was flat. Now, I know why Mark thought that. His 5th grade teacher told him that. And she told him that because that's what she believed. Elementary school teachers, and I know a lot of them, may be sweet and hardworking and do a lot of good, but they don't have very sophisticated knowledge of things. Actually, it's not true that everybody thought the earth was flat like a pancake and would fall off the edge in Columbus's time. In fact, this is one of the greatest stories I know. If you go back to 2300 BC, 300 years before the birth of Christ, the librarian at the great library in Alexandria, Egypt, was a Greek called Eratosthenes. And he not only proved the earth was a sphere, but he measured its circumference with great precision. And how did he do it? With observation, measurements, and mathematics. In other words, he used the beauty, the wonderful world of science. He noticed that on the longest day of the year, if you plumbed a stick, that is, hang a lead weight from a string and get a stick lined up with that so that it was straight up and down in the ground. On the longest day of the year at noon, where he lived in Alexandria, Egypt, that the sun would shine straight down and the stick would cast no shadow. The sun would shine straight down a deep well. And he thought that was interesting, and he wondered if it was that way everywhere. So he made a trip to Syene, a frontier outpost about 500 miles to the south. And the next time the longest day of the year came along, he was there with a stick plumbed into the ground, and he was ready when the sun got right up at noon. It did cast a shadow, and he carefully drew the size and the angle of the stick. And he went back to Alexandria, and he thought about this, and he took 2 sticks and put them on a piece of parchment so that he could put one straight up under the noon sun and bend it till he got that other stick's shadow exactly the way the one was in Syene. Now, he knew that there are 360 degrees in a circle. So he measured how many degrees these 2 sticks were apart with his protractor. And he knew there was 360, so he said, I can divide this distance into 360, and he came up with 52. That means it was 52 times further around the earth than it was between Alexandria and Syene. And he hired some men to carefully step off that distance from Alexandria to Syene, a distance of almost 500 miles. So he then just multiplied 52 times 500, and he came up with about 24,000 miles. Now think about it. Back in the days before we had airplanes, before we had lasers, a man just using his brain, a stick, an observation, some careful observations and some trigonometry, some mathematics, and some measurements, was able to measure the circumference of the earth. He didn't even know that he lived on the equator, and that's why the sun was straight overhead, that Alexandria happened to be right on the equator. But think about it. This is the beauty of science. If you clear your heads out and quit trying to believe in ghosts and witches and gods and demons, Johnny says he doesn't have any obligation to prove God to me. And I told him, yes, you do. We live in America, and we still live under English law, and that says the burden of proof is on the guy that says something exists. If you tell me that there's a goblin down in the garden, it's not my responsibility to prove it's not down there. It's your responsibility to prove it is. And in English law, if I say, well, you signed a contract with me to put a roof on my house, and you say I did not, and I say you did, and we go to court, the first thing the judge is going to ask me is, let's see the contract. And what if I looked at the judge and said, oh, no, 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 no. You've got to prove the contract doesn't exist. So the burden of proof, if you say there's a God like Yahweh, it's your responsibility to prove it. It's really not my responsibility to prove that he doesn't exist, although I'm convinced by every evidence I've ever had that he does not.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Serber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Serber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
All right, folks, we certainly do appreciate you being patient with us. I'm thinking this is my 3rd speech, and so, you know, I would make one correction here. I'm not under English law. I'm an American, and we're not actually operating under any law here when we're talking back and forth to each other. I'm not under any more burden than Larry is. I mean, Larry is basically saying that there's an alternative to what it is that we've been teaching. He's saying there's an alternative to a book that we can establish has been around at least since 200 years BC, and that it hasn't changed in all of that time. At least the Old Testament hasn't, because of the fact of the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls being compared with the oldest copy that we have, which is around 1000 AD. The Masoretic text has been around since 1000 AD. It's actually been dated by their own dating system, as have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are 200 years before Christ. So that's 1,200 years that the book has been around for sure. And it has given us many answers in regard to things about where we came from and where we're going. Now, all of this business about they've proven everything, let me let you have a listen to what the musings between the two of them on Charles's show the other night.
We discount science, and I'm like, why do we discount science? Because at least it's something we can see and feel or see it happening, the formula. We can diagnose it.
Now, the last time I checked, there was no one that has ever seen anything like this. As a matter of fact, Darwin decried the fact that there weren't enough fossil evidence to demonstrate any kind of change of this nature. In other words, we call it the missing link. They would actually call it something transitional. Currently, there are over 100 million identified and cataloged fossils in the world's museums. If the theory of evolution was valid, then there should be transitional forms in the fossil record reflecting the intermediate life forms. Another term for this is this transitional forms is missing links. Now, he can talk about my shouting down and my techniques all you want to, but you know what all that is? That is getting your attention off of what we're actually saying here tonight. There are no transitional fossils. There's nothing that proves any of this. And again, we're going to play Charles basically saying that that science is something we can see. Listen to the BBC documentary, which Dawkins was sitting right here while this was going on.
13 and 14 billion years ago.
Some scientists will tell you that time itself began in the Big Bang, and we should no more ask what happened before the Big Bang than we should ask what is north of the North Pole.
We should no more ask. See, they're telling us questions that we can't ask. We should no more ask. You don't ask the polymath anything about what happened when there was nothing in the world, because, you know, what we have, this is what he said to Cardinal Pell. He said, Dawkins said, you don't ask why, you just accept is. Well, who is he? I mean, you're telling me that I can't answer my children why we're here, that the only thing that I can do is just be satisfied with is? Again, that's these individuals trying to basically have their way and say the rest of us, there's something wrong with us. Now, folks, I actually have the entirety of this clip so that you can be the judge as to whether or not I gave Larry a chance to answer, or did he get tripped up on his inability to come up with facts. Take a listen.
I don't know the origin of life. I'm just saying there are things that indicate to me that these things happen. I'm just saying you don't have any evidence for a mind existing outside of me.
Wait a minute. You made I think that was a very great thing that you just said. You don't know, but you claim that I don't know because you don't know. Is that right?
Well, I don't know everything about it, but I have a lot of evidence that convinces me to lean in a certain direction. There is no evidence that a mind exists outside of
Let's make one statement at a time here. If we're going to have a discussion, I'm not really going long. I'm trying to keep it concise with you. You said that you actually adhered to a theory. Now you're telling us that only now are you getting evidence to prove that theory. So basically,
we're getting modifications in the evidence, and we don't know everything about this.
Now, you know what's happening, Mr. Serber? One thing you're not doing is you're not answering my first question. I answered yours. I believe that a mind is responsible for bringing the brain into being. Now, I want you to go ahead and tell our community what you think is the origin.
I think just nature. I think the universe has always been here, grinding. It's way beyond our comprehension at this point.
Wait. Now, you're trying to talk to us about something way beyond our comprehension tonight, and you want us to listen to you? Now, I want you to tell our... Now, I really wasn't shouting him down. I don't know how he got that. I was letting him make his points. We were staying concise with it. And he basically said that he's going to talk to us about something beyond our comprehension. Well, listen, folks, if it's beyond our comprehension, I really don't want to hear about it, especially from somebody who has just admitted that he doesn't even understand it himself. And then in our discussion tonight, he said, I could have learned something if I would have just let him talk. I was letting him talk, and we went on for several minutes of him talking about things that were beyond his comprehension. It's the same thing when you talk with Richard Dawkins. It's the same business. Now, I would say the difference between Richard and Larry is not at all arrogant like Richard Dawkins is. Now, I'm going to let you listen to a little bit of the Pell Dawkins discussion, and as they talk about nothing, actually, and listen to what I really say is arrogant about him when people question him.
You asked me to give you a layman's interpretation. It would be a very, very layman's interpretation. When you have matter and antimatter and you put them together, they cancel each other out and give rise to nothing.
Now, who can prove that? Who can prove that when you have matter and antimatter that they cancel each other out? It's just a theory that Krauss has just come up with. They're just now trotting this thing out, and basically people began to laugh.
Lawrence, Krauss is now suggesting is that if you start with nothing, the process can go into reverse and produce matter and antimatter.
So when you have nothing, when you start with nothing, you can actually introduce antimatter. Now, did antimatter come from Star Wars? Where is this? And Charles said, we love science because we can see it. Have we seen antimatter yet? Or is this just in the mixed up mind of Krauss, who says that 2 plus 2 is 5? Now remember, from Larry's own mouth, we're mixed up when we say things about the Trinity like someone who says 2 plus 2 is 5, but yet his own man wears a t-shirt around that says if you have big enough 2's, you can actually equal 5. And the same man has antimatter that actually gives us something from nothing. Continue to listen.
Theory is still being worked out. It's a very difficult theory, mathematical theory. I'm not qualified to answer the question, but what I am sure about is that it most certainly is not solved by postulating an intelligence, a creative intelligence, who raises even bigger questions of his own existence. That certainly is not going to be the answer.
Okay, this is that line of thinking. I don't know what's going on, but y'all sure don't know either. You see, that's all he's done. He said, he gave this very sophisticated talk about nothing coming from nothing, antimatter and all that, and then he says, I don't have all the answers, but guess what? We don't solve anything by bringing an intelligent mind into the being. That doesn't solve anything. You know what that is? That's little children saying, well, I don't know, but you don't know either, and so I don't want to hear from you because I know you don't know because I don't know. You see, that hasn't accomplished anything.
Whatever else is.
George Pell. Thank you. The trouble, well, there are many troubles with Richard's teachings, but a fundamental one is that he dumbs down God and he soups up nothing. He continually talks as though God is some sort of upmarket figure within space and time. Now, from 450, 500 BC, where with the Greek philosophers, God is outside space and time. God is a mixture of particles and denied. A bit funny to be trying to define nothing. And is talking about under the heading of nothing. And there's a very good review of this in the New York Times. Not a pro-religious paper at all, where Krauss is absolutely denied and demolished, although especially by his supporters claiming that he says things come out of nothing. He doesn't say that.
It's a matter,
you can quickly respond to that.
You can dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
And I do too. See, he didn't like that. You don't question the polymath when he says the world came out of nothing. All right, we're going to run a commercial and then we're going to get ready for our back and forth.
Richard Dawkins, an avowed atheist, has been an enemy of God for years.
A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Now a disciple of Dawkins from Reidsville, Larry Serber is going to go toe-to-toe with Johnny Robertson live on WGSR in Reidsville. Watch Johnny Robertson versus Larry Serber debate live August 2nd and August 9th from 8 to 9 p.m. You don't want to miss it.
Okay, we're actually in a section where we're answering questions of each other. I have 1 minute to ask a question, and Larry has 3 minutes to answer me this question, so I'm going to ask my question. Basically, Larry, my question comes from the video that took place in Martinsville. We're going to take a listen. I basically mess my own self up every single time on this. See if I can make sure I get my time in.
come to your senses. You've been hypnotized, your preacher's telling you crazy stuff. Learn real science with real instruments and learn to love life and love learning. Learn to be a stronger, better, more humane person. Learn to be a more decent person. So you can feel proud of yourself that you don't cheat people and you're moral. You grow every...
Okay, now what I want to ask out of that is, when you say learn to be moral, and you talked about Randy Travis and his woes, and you also made a judgment about Bob Lawson just wanting to get rid of God so he can have more wives. I want to know where it is that you actually get your morals. Can you explain that to us tonight?
Yes, I can. We have DNA evidence now that, beyond doubt, I've never heard Johnny try to answer this, but I said people don't mind the DNA evidence using paternity, proving who the daddy of a baby is, or using it in criminal courts, proving who, if the suspect's blood was the guilty person. But with DNA evidence, we can show that humans are definitely, positively related to chimpanzees through a common ancestor. This is in the DNA. Our genealogy is recorded here. We've recently mapped the genome for the dog so completely that we now know something we didn't know before. We used to think that dogs came from foxes, wolves, coyotes, dingoes, but we now know they all came from wolves, and we can trace it right back through the DNA. And I would say that as life on Earth has evolved, as we have gone through the development, just like a baby goes through a microcosm of the development, like I said, Johnny when he was 4 weeks old in his mother's womb, he looked just like a salamander with a tail. Life has gone through these processes, and we have reached a point where in our brains, and I say all we have is in our brains, there is no part of our personality floating around in the air. Like, there are radio waves, but we can detect those, people. We can detect radio waves. But there's no proof that a disembodied soul is floating in the air. And I would say this. After we have evolved to a certain point, and I'm not sure exactly where that point is, we have something that Sigmund Freud studied and called the superego. As Dawkins mentioned earlier, there is something in me that if I saw Johnny being hurt, it would hurt me because I know I don't want to be hurt. This is purely natural, folks. It has nothing to do with any god, Zeus or Yahweh or any other made-up god. It has to do with what naturally develops in us, and we can show a great deal of this in the laboratory. The conscience is just part of the brain. We develop in our brain day by day, as I said earlier. I said last time that my mother got dementia. Little parts of her brain were disappearing and parts of her personality were disappearing. And if a part of her personality disappeared with her little bits of her brain gone, what happens when her whole brain's gone? Johnny has never offered any evidence. And I want to say one more thing before I leave this. Johnny was not telling the truth about shouting me down. He didn't show the part I was talking about. When I was talking about hydrogen atoms in his elbow, and he did. He said, answer the question. Have you ever been to the sun? And how do you know? And he did shout me down. He's not telling the truth. I wish he would play that whole clip about me talking about hydrogen. He did shout me down, and it's a shame because, as I said before, he could have learned about the spectroscope. My answer is we do have a part of our brains in more advanced animals that is a conscience. Not every human has it. I don't think Donald Trump has it. He's a megalomaniacal fathead that would destroy a village to build a golf course.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right. You can ask me a question then.
Okay. Okay, I've talked to Johnny about this before, and it's the problem of evil. There's a whole, I'm sure Johnny knows this, there's a whole segment of theology that deals with just the problem of evil. It's been a very thorny problem for theologians for a long time. If God is all-powerful and all-knowing and still a just God, why is there evil in the world? And I say evil such as a little innocent baby being born in agonizing, excruciating pain only to die a week later. That's evil. Well, many religious people have said That's not God's problem, that's Satan. Well, my question for Johnny is, why has God not killed Satan a long time ago? He killed Uzzah for mishandling the Ark of the Covenant. Why couldn't he just as easily kill Satan? I don't think there's any reason why God, we would have evil in the world if there was a just God.
Okay. My simple answer to that is that in order to have free will, there has to be the possibility of being evil. And so for God to give us a world in which we are free to act, then there has to be the possibility of evil. Now, a lot of the evil that people are attributing to God didn't come from God at all. As a matter of fact, it comes from misbehaving men and women. Like, say, for instance, the issues that Bob Lawson's wives would have of being left behind, financial problems that they have as a result of divorce and what have you, it comes directly from the fact that individuals will not listen to what God says. So I wish that we could actually get down to the amount of things that men actually do that bring about these evil things, as he said is evil. But, and that's my question. And I'm going to respond to the fact that he did not answer my question a moment ago. When I asked him about morals, he didn't say anything about where morals come from. This is basically Richard Dawkins' own statement. He says, I don't see any justification evolution for or against racism. The study of evolution is not the business of providing justification for anything. In reality, how does Larry even get the idea of evil in the first place? If there isn't anything in evolution about, and this is a direct quote from Richard Dawkins, and if there isn't anything in evolution about racism, why would he say that racism is wrong? Why does he even say that there is such a thing as suffering? Because in the final analysis, in one of the books that Richard Dawkins wrote, A River Out of Eden, or I can't remember the name of it, I have it laying over here, A River Out of Eden, yeah, he basically says that our world is exactly what we would expect if it came from nothing and it's just something we evolved out of or into. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. And I expect that Larry's going to come on and say that Richard Dawkins didn't really mean what he said about there not being any evil. You see, one of the things that we do, and I will let you listen to that entire clip, not in this debate, but I certainly will answer that later on. I don't believe that I shouted him down. And if I did, if we go back through the debate, through that, and you actually hear me shouting him down, I mean, who else even gives a person the opportunity to call in on television? I heard Charles say that he just loves to hear from Larry. I don't remember very many calls that Larry has made to Charles. I don't remember seeing Larry on television. We let him on for an hour last night on Thursday night on our broadcast. So we're really not the kind of people that are really shouting people down because we're afraid they're going to get to say something or we're going to learn anything. We're the kind of people who basically are willing to let them come on, and he didn't answer the question about morals tonight. And really, what are morals? Who gets to dictate the morals? Is it Bob Lawson or is it Larry? Who really is in charge when Richard Dawkins actually says there is no evil in the first place?
Okay, Johnny's not telling the truth again. I did answer the question. He asked me where my morals come from, and I said from a highly evolved part of my brain called the superego, the conscience. I did answer it. I'm not sure he answered mine, though, because I said, that Johnny and them don't believe in born in sin. And what about an innocent baby? My question was, if there's the kind of evil, he said, well, free will. What about a baby who doesn't really have free will? Is born in an agonizing condition? I'm not sure that he answered that. But anyway, let's move on. Okay. The most important event in the history of Christianity, I'm sure Johnny would agree, was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's reported 4 different ways in 4 different Gospels. There's something about how they found the people at the tomb, or some women or some men. A little different. I heard Mark McMinnis say the other night, well, different people can see the same scene and report it differently. I'm not going to let you get away with that because this is dictated by your God in your Bible, which is supposed to be every word true. So my question here is that if the most important event in your religion, Christianity, was the resurrection of Jesus, why was it not reported to everyone everywhere? Why did we have to wait?
Okay. I have a very simple answer to that as well. In the New Testament, there are passages that actually say that they're in order. Let me give you one, for instance. In Acts chapter 11, let's see if I can pull this up. In Acts chapter 11, verse 4, the Bible says, "And Peter rehearsed the matter from the beginning and expounded it in order, saying to them." Now, if you actually take Acts 11 and Acts 10 and you read them together, you will find that they're actually different. And the reason why is because Peter basically just tells the account. But then he is on trial in Acts chapter 11. And so under scrutiny, he becomes very specific about telling it in order. Nowhere in these accounts did these individuals have any command, or neither did they say at any point, listen, we're telling this thing in order. In other words, it's like we're dictating to a court or we're going to be judged on it. They basically told as the Holy Spirit guided them. And you know what? I don't particularly want to read the same account 4 times. What's the point? What's the point of hearing from John the exact same thing as Mark and as Matthew and as Luke? What's the point? What actually happened is that the Holy Spirit inspired them each to give elements that were actually different. They were actually from a different perspective. I tell you what, a lot of times we like to hear witnesses. When the police go around, they ask this one, well, what did you see? You were over on this side of the road. Well, what did you see? You were over on this side of the road. And they get different accounts as a result of the different perspectives. Now, what he didn't say is that there were contradictions. There were no contradictions in the account. So I don't have a problem with that at all. And my answer is right here, Acts chapter 11, verse 4. Peter said he was telling it in order, and he went down, and it was actually different than in Acts chapter 10. So that's my answer. That's not a problem. Now, I want to say again, he still really didn't answer the question about morals. When you get down to morals, if these individuals are going to be running our world, in other words, we're going to dispense with God. And let me say also that Larry knows, as does the community know, that we do not dispense out morality like denominational people do. We believe that they just change it anytime they want to. They will switch it around to suit themselves. They will suit their pastors. They've got all kinds of systems where they make money and things of that nature. We're not saying that morality should come from them either. But I'm saying tonight, are we going to get rid of morality as the Bible actually depicts it and as we can defend it here on what does the Bible say? And whose morality there are we going to take? Because Richard Dawkins, his own record saying that there is no such thing as evil. And the baby, it's going to be my turn to ask the next question, I believe. The baby that was born, he said, I can't remember your exact word. How did you say that baby's...
born in agony and dies a week later and didn't do anything wrong.
Great. All right. Let me see if I can get my question down to a minute here. Okay. In 1 minute, we're going to talk about the baby that was born in agony, and I'm going to ask Larry, well, let's discuss babies in agony and what to do about situations like that. What would you do about these children that are in agonizing situations and possibly are going to live the rest of their life in agony?
Example might be, suppose you take the argument in favor of abortion up until the baby was 1 year old, say, or 2 years old. And so if a baby was 1 year old and turned out to have some horrible, incurable disease that meant it was going to die in agony in later life, what about infanticide? Strictly morally, I can see no objection to that at all. I would be in favor of infanticide.
Okay. That's the end of my question. What about infanticide, killing babies? Are you with Dawkins on that?
Well, he's talking about ending suffering, just like older people sometimes with that. Who was he, Dr. Kevorkian? You know, some people can choose. You said free will. Some people can choose to end their lives. But I can't let this go without saying this. Johnny, are you serious when you say there's no contradictions in the 4 accounts of Jesus? I mean, one time there's 3 women there, and another time there's a couple men. There are contradictions. That seems pretty silly to me that you would say that. But anyway, here's my next question. Surely you don't believe that a just God would condemn the billion people in North America and South America who never got a chance to hear of Jesus. Now, if I'm understanding you right, and I think I am because I've been watching you guys a long time very closely, the plan of salvation is accept Jesus, proclaim Jesus, be baptized for the remission of your sins, meet with the saints, repent of your sins, live a good life, those things. The Americans, the North Americans and South Americans between the 1st century and the 15th century never had the opportunity to hear about Jesus. They didn't know he existed. So you're going to commit them to eternal hell? That's so unfair. And your God you claim is a just God. How do you explain a just God would do something like that, Johnny? That's madness. That's not philosophy or theology. That's just madness. Your God is an insane, violent God. He ordered his people to enslave other tribes and murder them and kill all the adult women and use the girls for child rape. Your God is a child-raping, genocidal maniac. How can you possibly worship somebody like that? And again, how can you call him a just God?
All right. I tell you what, all of these children that are dying and suffering that Larry's talking about, why don't we just let Richard Dawkins handle them? He says that let's make sure that we get this right, because he's basically saying that individuals who suffer, that are going to suffer, then he would be for infanticide. Now, do you realize how many people in the world are starving, are dying, that children that die as a result of starvation? So, according to Richard Dawkins' position, let's let you listen to it again.
Strictly morally, I can see no objection to that at all. I would be in favor of infanticide. But I think I would worry about, I think I would wish at least to give consideration to the person who says, well, where does it end?
Yes, I can see that there is a
All right, so you see what he just said? He's worried about the fact that he is for infanticide, and he is worried because of the person who says, well, where will it end? If you're going to kill the babies that are suffering, well, what about the old people that are suffering? And so, you see, what we're really getting to, folks, this is actually what I wanted to get to. If we're not going to have God, I mean, Larry is making all kinds of accusations against God, but we have Richard Dawkins' own record saying that there's nothing wrong with, or that evolution has nothing to say about racism one way or the other. And he also says in his book that there is no such thing as evil. There is no such thing as good. So when Larry comes on and sincerely looks you in the eye and tells you that he is for good, like for instance, he's for the keeping down of the monument because of the way individuals here in the black community feel. Well, is he really? I mean, is Richard Dawkins for that? Richard Dawkins says there is no such thing as good and evil. There is really, I don't see any justification of evolution either for or against racism. The study of evolution is not in the business of providing justification for anything. So can I ask, where in the world did Larry get all of his positions? Did he evolve into this?
Yes.
And if you did evolve, well then why can't I have the right to evolve into a religious frame of mind? And why start downing us because we believe in God when really in actuality he's saying that we all evolved into the positions, and yet as a good moral individual he wants to trash us when in fact we don't really have any choice according to his own doctrine. So you see, folks, I have a hard time following along with these individuals who say that they don't know where we came from, that we really came out of nothing. They say that a single cell evolved into a caring, knowing. Well, which person are we talking about? Are we talking about Randy Travis? Are we talking about Bob Lawson? He's not a caring. Are we talking about Ira Tilley? You know, which one of these caring, wonderful people are we? And when you really get down to it, atheism does not have a moral rule. Okay, we're going to open our phone lines. And I think our phone number has been up. Now, we did have some kind of issue last time. At least individuals said that we had an issue, that when they were trying to call in. You know, in actuality, Scotty, my understanding is that y'all are having trouble with your Ustream. Is that still correct? From what I understood, Larry, the Ustream individuals are telling me the Ustream's down. Possibly, we're not having.
I've heard people call to the
still down. Okay.
Heard people call to the station this week and say they couldn't get through when you and I were debating.
All right, and I heard that too. All right, we got the phone line coming up now. Yes, you're on. What's the Bible say?
Yeah, how y'all doing this evening?
Good.
Evolution by nature, natural selection, is based on species genetically changing or mutating for the purpose of enhancing their reproduction or survival. Would that be true, Mr. Serber?
Yeah, you know, this is Jim Brewer, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you called the last time I was on with James Oldfield, and you said, I want to see things in the laboratory. Would you be willing to read a chapter out of Richard Dawkins' book called The Greatest Show on Earth? A chapter called Right Before Our Eyes that has now demonstrated beyond all doubt that macroevolution, I'm not talking about microevolution like the dark moths on dark buildings are not eaten by the birds. I'm talking about macroevolution where the species actually change to where they can no longer be considered in the same species. This, what they did, they used E. coli bacteria, Jim, and they multiply so rapidly that in a few years they can go through so many generations. You've probably heard of bacteria becoming antibiotic resistant. That's because they evolve. And I think we've now demonstrated beyond all doubt the process of non-random natural selection, yes.
Okay, well, I would be willing to read that chapter, but since it's done for survival or reproductive purposes, right? That's what evolution's all about?
Well, it's not survival of the fittest, Jim. Darwin said it is not the strongest that survive and pass on. It is not the most intelligent. It is the ones that are most easily adaptable to change. And that's why I worry so much about the Church of Christ. I look for progress. I was watching the Olympics the other day, and I was saying, why do they still have boxing? Where the whole goal is to damage another man's brain. We can't evolve beyond barbarism as long as we're locked into an old way. I think evolution is a natural process that leads us up and away from slavery and cannibalism and human sacrifice and animal sacrifice. I really do. And I think that the members of the species that survive are those that are more easily adaptable to change. And as I say, the Church of Christ is not adaptable to change at all because they got that bolt through their head with a Loctite when a big wrench. That scares me.
Okay, but now clams, if you go back to fossil evidence, clams are virtually the same now as they were as far back as we can find fossil evidence.
I'm not sure. Maybe, perhaps. I'll have to, I'll take your word for it. If modern day clams seem virtually identical to billion-year-old clams, I'll take your word for it. But I don't know. I'd have to do some research.
Okay, well, snails, clams, things of this nature, lower forms, things that have not evolved are still here today, while other things are still supposedly through evolution evolving and becoming extinct. So it would seem to say that something that doesn't evolve has a longer time on Earth than things that do evolve.
Well, there are a lot of different circumstances and pressures to evolve. And there are things that have remained the same for a long time, and there are things that have evolved fairly rapidly to adapt to the conditions. You mentioned extinction. You realize that most of the creatures that have ever lived are extinct. That makes me wonder about God's perfect plan if so many things came out and went extinct. But you're right, there are things that have not shown much evolution, and it's just like with the strata of rocks. No fossils are ever formed in igneous rocks, obviously, because it's hot and molten. They can only form in the sedimentary rocks, and we can't really date the sedimentary rocks accurately, so we have to go by the nearby igneous rocks. If we say, well, this igneous rock here is 6.7 million years old, and this is 6.8 million years old, and there's some sedimentary rock with well-preserved fossils here, then it must be between those ages. And of course, the vast majority of creatures that have ever lived are not fossilized. That's the problem. And as far as missing links and things, I'm sure you know there are no missing links much anymore. That problem has been solved.
So why has that problem been solved? Because they have changed the way evolution is defined. We don't any longer talk about, as they did when I was in school, about the missing link and transitional things being found. They've actually changed it now. Dawkins has a whole line of how he explains it now, like we're just ancestors now. We're not really ever going to find a missing link, and that's kind of an update on the way evolution is. And Jim, I think you know that that's exactly what they do on a regular basis. They're constantly updating the theory. Geological timetable, it throws them a loop. It's not always the way they lay it out. Sometimes they find a strata that is actually not the way they describe it, and you don't hear about that. You don't hear about, say for instance, frozen things that are found in Antarctica that change the way that they should. As a matter of fact, I don't think, have you ever heard of any news organization talking about the T-Rex, that the bone was actually found that had blood cells in it, elastic? Did you hear that reported, or did you hear it anywhere else besides our television broadcast?
No, there are many other things, but the reason I bring up the clam is because it's through all these different layers of stratus, and it's remained the same up until this point. Larry brought up that morals come through his development of the mind, or the evolution to the point of human mind, human brain, to be able to have this ego and that's where morals come from. Clam hasn't evolved, and so if evolution's purpose is for reproduction and survival in the long run, why is the clam survives today as it did since before there were Homo sapiens?
There were no pressures.
They want to put in
there were no pressures on it to evolve, Jim. You need to study the pressures that cause evolution. I would like Johnny, if he would, just to read this right here, if he will.
I've already read as much of
well, could you just please read this to Jim?
Link, why do I mean missing? Why do you mean missing?
What do you mean? Missing link? What do you mean missing? Here's a whole chapter about how some of these things that they used to call missing links have been discovered.
And this is basically their rewording of the whole missing link.
No.
We don't have anything like this. Is this what we were taught in school, that eventually we're going to find a missing link, a transitional? No, they have reworded it. Now, y'all got, basically he got to do a lot of talking while he was answering you, Jim. I want you to notice what the article that is involved with this, these cells that are found in a T-Rex, that just really threw science on its ear in regard to the age of a T-Rex. Notice what was actually said. It says, after all, as any textbook will tell you, when an animal dies, soft tissue such as blood vessels, muscle, and skin decay and disappear over time, while hard tissue like bone may gradually acquire minerals from the environment and become fossil. Schweitzer, one of the first scientists to use the tools of modern cell biology to study dinosaurs, has upended the conventional wisdom by showing that some rock-hard fossils, tens of millions of years old, may have remains of soft tissue hidden away in their interiors. Now, which is it? Can soft tissue actually last tens of millions of years old? Well, we know they can't. They have already established that there's no way that it can actually last that long. It would actually, is it 10 after? Yeah, we go to 10:30. They, all the scientists would say that there's no way that it could happen. So how is it that this T-Rex actually had soft tissue in it? Well, one answer could be it wasn't 68 million years old in the first place. None of these things, and why is it that they never looked at that? The reason it hasn't been discovered before is no right-thinking paleontologist would do what Mary did with her specimen. What does that mean? No paleontologist would ever break a leg and test it to see how old it was. Why? Because they already had their mind made up. They already had their mind made up that it's 10 million years old, or how many ever million years old. But what did Mary do? Well, Mary really didn't do this on purpose. The T-Rex was too big to get on the helicopter. So they had to break the leg. Well, while they had it broken, she decided to do what no paleontologist would do. She ran some tests on it just to satisfy herself. And what did she find? She found something that upended their whole system: soft blood cells, or soft tissues that actually contain blood cells. Now, we're never going to hear that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is going to be sunk somewhere in the middle of maybe the 100 million fossils that they talk about, that they were gathering up to try to find the transitional species. So we're going to let Jim go. I think we got another person
I will read that for Larry.
Okay.
Okay. Did you say no paleontologist would have done what Mary did? I
read
disagree
it.
with that.
I was simply reading the article that has been put forth
I mean,
on that.
I know all paleontologists that I've ever heard of that are real would explore anything. There's no limit to scientific discovery. We'll go anywhere. In fact, even if we're proven wrong, we will. You're not a scientist if you won't do that,
All right,
John.
so if that's the case, Larry, then how come no scientist has ever found this in a T-Rex bone or any other bone?
I did read that article somewhere a while back, and that is
okay,
very,
we have a
very
caller.
interesting.
Yes, caller, you're on What Does the Bible Say?
This is Johnny.
Yes.
Hey, Johnny, this is, I'm calling from Myrtle Beach. I ain't listening to you guys tonight. I just wanted to speak to you for a few minutes, and y'all haven't put a lively discussion tonight, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
It's okay, yeah.
Okay. I wanted to speak to Larry for a minute, if it's okay. You there, Larry?
I'm right here. Go.
Okay, buddy. I would never try to prove that there is a God. I know are you trying to prove there isn't a God?
No, sir, I'm not trying to prove there's not one. I'm simply saying that Johnny and his Bible have never given me any evidence at all that there is an invisible force floating around, controlling our lives and things. In fact, I'm very, very confident that there's no God, but I can't prove it. You can't prove a negative.
Yeah, that's right. You're right about that. I love science, man. Science was my favorite subject in high school. You're a scientist, aren't you?
Yes, sir, I'd like to think so, and I certainly appreciate you saying you love science. That makes me feel very happy.
Yeah, this is one thing I've often wondered about, and maybe you can give me scientific evidence on this, why the sun is the perfect distance from the earth, and the earth rotates on its axis and gives us the seasons where we are able to grow food to eat, and how water, which is such a wonderful source of life, is consisted of atoms that are two different atoms, that one of them is highly flammable by itself, and the other is highly flammable by itself, but together they can put out fire. I just wonder about stuff like that, and how that can just be something that would be possible without some kind of intervention. Do you understand what I'm saying, Larry?
Yes, let me try to answer you. What you're talking about is the Goldilocks problem. Goldilocks, if you remember from your childhood, went into the bear's home, and the mother bear's porridge was too hot, and the father bear's porridge was too cold, and the baby bear's porridge was just right. And people say, well, because all the conditions here on Earth are just right for us humans to live, with the water, the oxygen, the temperature, we're just the right distance from the sun. They say, well, there had to be a God that made that. I say you're going after it after the fact. We wouldn't be here if these conditions were not like this. So we can't just say that everything was prepared for us. Because things were as they were, we were able to develop here. That would be my answer to it.
Okay, sir. Let me give an answer about. Really, the answer is Larry doesn't know. This is cosmology, and he doesn't know. They haven't found out about the universe yet. At least the scientists haven't. That's why Lawrence Krauss in his book is actually saying what he's saying about something out of nothing. They really don't know the answers to this stuff. But I will give you an answer that Dawkins gives in his book in regard to, and I'll just show this to you. You can see one thing on here. Let me move it up to where you can actually see the man who has got the cards in his hand. Richard Dawkins basically says about us being able to survive. In other words, us coming to the point of existence, how we are today, and we're actually able to survive in this in this environment. He basically says it like this. You saw the man that was shuffling the cards? He says that if you shuffle cards enough times, you can actually get a hand where everybody at the table, 4 people at the table, and you give them, I believe it's 13 cards each. You can shuffle enough times. Do you know that eventually everybody at the table will get a full hand of spades, the other person will get a full hand of hearts, the other person will get a full hand of diamonds, and what's the other? I forget what.
Spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs.
Yeah.
But how many times do you say you'd have to shuffle
that's
there, Johnny?
That's the point. We don't even know. I don't even know the number of times.
536 octillion, 477 septillion, 737 sextillion.
Well, it's funny that he knows how to say that when Richard Dawkins says, I wouldn't even know how to say that number. But nevertheless, Richard Dawkins says this. He says that's the way it is with us. Genes have selected what'd you say, 536 million? No,
536 octillion,
okay, I don't want to hear the whole thing. This is my turn to answer. Octillion is what he started with. About as far as I know how to go up is a trillion. So basically he's saying that if genes select each other enough times, you give enough chances for these genes to replicate, eventually, just like you have a hand where everybody has spades and they have hearts and they have diamonds and they have clubs, that we will end up being how we are today. And that's the best answer they can give. And I say that's ridiculous. That is just simply ridiculous. They don't know about the universe. They've already admitted, both of them don't. And then they sit there and say, well, Darwin figured it all out. Darwin didn't even know about genes. So
Mendel discovered genes.
Okay, all right. Appreciate your call.
Now,
Johnny?
Yes.
When you guys leave the other night, when your callers hang up for the night, and it's all said and done, do you think that you're going to go away the same as you came there, not being convinced anymore that there isn't a God, and Larry's going to go away convinced that there is anymore, or are you going away with the same way you came there?
Okay, my answer, he asked me that. My answer, sir, is just like last week. A lady called up after the show, and she said she had a son in one of the Virginia colleges, and since he'd gone to college, he'd gotten all mixed up. And what I did is I offered her a free DVD of our discussion last time. That's what I actually am hoping to accomplish. We have individuals who are listening to our broadcast, and they are a bit confused because these folks that are occupying our university seem like they have all the answers. Tonight, I hope that I've demonstrated that they absolutely don't. They're making this stuff up as they go. They're saying silly stuff like everything came from nothing. Now, if I can do that, if I can actually cause them to realize that these folks just have the room. You know, when you're in a college class, you have the room. And it's very difficult for a person who doesn't have the answers on the student side to buck somebody that has the room, and at the end of the day, he also has the red pen who will grade you. And so I hope that we've been able to help individuals see these folks really don't have the answers. And I don't think Larry has given the answers about morals. I don't think he's given the answer about the cosmology.
I thought I did.
And so what you just saying that we evolved to morals, Larry, which
We've got a part of the brain.
Well, which one of our brains are we going to follow? Yours? We're going to follow Bob Lawson. And I had up here a moment ago, you said that you couldn't figure out why in the Olympics they had stopped boxing.
No, had not stopped boxing.
Had not stopped boxing. And basically the way that you came on this broadcast here with Bob Lawson is that would have been a boxing match had Bob probably been a few years younger. And so whose morals are we going to follow here? I surely don't want to follow Charles's morals because he's promoting Alfred Kinsey, who you say, willing to say is a pedophile. So, you know, we at the end of the day, where did our morals come from and which one are we going to follow?
Caller, can I answer? It's very unlikely that anything Johnny has shown me, because he gets it all out of that Bible that I've studied and don't believe, that I'm going to change. But let me say this. Johnny said, well, Larry said this because he doesn't know, but I do know some things. I know why we have summer and winter. Do you, Johnny?
I can read Richard Dawkins' book and basically tell why we have summer and winter. But
do you know now? Answer the question.
If I do tell you how we have summer and winter, what is that going to change?
Well, it'll prove you know something.
Okay,
but I don't think you do.
Right, let's just say that I don't.
Okay, I don't think you do.
Now, let's say
but
that
I do know some things.
Okay, can I say?
Go ahead.
Let's say, for argument's sake, that I don't know why that we have summer and winter. Now, Larry's on the same plane with me when I asked Larry, how did the world come into being? So just because I don't know that doesn't make him ahead of me if he doesn't know how the world came into being. So really, have you accomplished anything because of demonstrating that, Larry?
Well, science, I think religious people put down science and say science doesn't know everything, but we do know a great deal more than most people give us credit for. We know why there are rainbows. We know why there are earthquakes. We know why there is summer and winter. We know why snow is different from sleet, even though they're both frozen H2O. We know a great deal more than Johnny would give us credit for, and that bothers me because that's why I want Johnny to read this whole book. That's why I want everybody in the audience to get this book and read the whole book. That's why I offered to tell Sheila Richards that I would buy her this book and try to help her confusion, because I think if somebody would absorb this entire book, I don't see how Johnny could read this entire book and not come away and say, well, yeah, this makes a lot of sense in a lot of places. I don't agree with all of it, but a lot of this makes a great deal of sense. It's clear. It's brilliant. I don't see how he could possibly say that.
Okay, when I read the book...
Guys, I'd like to say one more thing, and I'm going to let somebody else talk for a while. But, Johnny, I was watching you a couple weeks ago, buddy, and I have never seen you when you really got emotional, and all the time I've been watching you. But I could see something in your voice. You almost broke down one time up, but I think you felt you were explaining to us why you do what you do, and it just seemed like you were really touched, and your heart was touched or something. And, Larry, and I really think a whole lot of both of you guys. And Larry,
thank you.
When I look at you, I see a kind, caring individual, and I hope you find what you're searching for, pal. Good night.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the call, and we have, I don't know what's going on here. I think we have a line that doesn't usually blinking. You're on What's the Bible Say?
Hello?
Yes, you're on live.
I'm on live?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. You're on.
How you doing? I have a question for Larry.
Okay.
Larry, if you believe in the Big Boom theory.
Well, the Big Bang.
Why can't you get? Okay.
Okay, we're going to have to...
I'm still on the line. I'm breaking up.
Okay, we're
anyway,
going to have to move on.
Why can't you get something to blow up and create something now?
Well, I don't think the Big Bang theory says that something blew up and created something. It was just the matter was concentrated and spread out, and it may expand so far and then yo-yo back in, and it may have been going on for like this infinitely. I'm not sure. The Big Bang theory is interesting, but I can't get something to blow up and create something. I can't take a pile of bricks and put dynamite under them and have it come down a house. But I can put a sperm to an egg and have it become a baby 9 months later. So things do develop.
Okay, he really can't do that either. Thank you for the call, caller. Actually, all you can do is go through the motions, and somebody else has already set into place whether or not the sperm fertilizes the egg. I surely hope you're not taking credit for you actually doing that. You're on What's the Bible Say? Yes, caller.
Yeah. A while back, I was watching a show on television, and they were talking about the polar bear. The polar bear was losing its habitat because of the ice cap melting and global warming and such. And they said that the polar bear actually actually was once a brown bear, and that the brown bear wandered out from...
Sir, you're going to have to give us a question really quick here. We're about to run out of time.
Well, the brown bear had wandered, to where the ice was, and then it changed its color and became a polar bear. So now the polar bear was dying out. But I thought, well, that was such foolishness, because why can't the bear just revert back? Why can't it go back and revert back to where it's not cold and not ice and snow and such, and become a black bear?
Well, things like that would, things like that would take time. What you're talking about is adaptations, and we all know now that there are no such thing as races. They're just adaptations. The blacker people are around the equator, and their skin is to absorb more UV rays. And the further you go up north, the paler and blonder people get. There's really not any races. They're just adaptations. And the polar bear was an adaptation as well. It's like sickle cell trait. a lot of black people get sickle cell anemia, but that's because they grew up along the equator, and that sickle cell, that boomerang-shaped cell, helped protect them against malaria. But now it causes problems because it clogs up their capillaries. So, yeah, I don't know what you're saying about why can't the polar bear just suddenly go back when the humans destroy its environment.
Another point I'd like to make.
Okay, sir, we're at 5 minutes till, and I'm going to have to give Larry 2 minutes to close out, and then I'm going to close out. All right, appreciate your call. All right, folks, we would like to go all night. We got another caller on the line, but Larry's going to have to say his last piece. You got 2 minutes, Larry, and then I'm going to close out the show.
Okay. I would like to say that my most pressing thought right now is I really wish Johnny had answered my question about why has God never killed Satan? If Satan is so much a cause of the evil in the world, why in the world didn't God drop him like a sack of potatoes, just like he did Uzzah, just like he did Lot's wife for the crime of turning around and looking at the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah, turned her into a pillar of sodium chloride or something. I really wish Johnny could somehow tell me in his closing remarks just that one thing. Why has his God, Yahweh, never killed Satan and put an end to all this horrible evil? Another thing, God, it's very much seems to me like something made up by a child because of things like Cain and Abel. He loved Abel's gift of a bloody lamb because that's exactly what he asked for. He didn't like Cain's gift of vegetables that Cain had grown. Why does the God of a universe that can own a sun or a planet or a galaxy need a sheep or vegetables? That's so childish. Also, why did God put the tree of knowledge of good and evil right in the middle of the oasis there and then tell Eve, don't eat from it, knowing he had made her with curiosity? Curiosity, you know, she's bound to want to go out. That'll make her really want to go over there and see what the tree's like. And then a talking snake comes up to her. I don't know how snakes talk. Apparently this snake was more like a lizard because I think it walked around and then later was cursed to crawl on its belly. But how did it talk to her? A talking snake? I haven't seen a talking snake. I asked Johnny last week about Moses creating a snake of brass, just zinc and copper, and then people could gaze at it and it would protect them from the hemotoxins and neurotoxins in actual snake venom. He's never answered any of these things. He laughs quickly when an old lady says she could talk the fire out of a burn. Why doesn't he laugh that's gazing at a copper and zinc bronze snake and that protecting somebody somehow from snake bite? He never gives any mechanisms. He never tells how this stuff works. He just says it's in this Bible and God said it and I believe it. And okay. All right.
Folks, in my closing remarks, I'm basically going to go off at 10:30. I want to see what for some reason we're blurred here. I was going to read this at the end. This is a statement that Richard Dawkins writes in the afterword of Krauss's book. He says, here we come to perhaps the most remarkable lesson that we are left with on closing Lawrence Krauss's book. Not only does physics tell us how something could have come from nothing, it goes further by Krauss' account and shows us that nothingness is unstable. Something was almost bound to spring into existence from it. Now, folks, that is, when we start talking about who knows what, my answer to Larry about God and Satan is, I can't help that God doesn't arrange things to suit Larry. That's basically what we're coming down to. Larry's saying that since God doesn't do things the way that Larry would say that things need to be done, and you know what? I really question whether Larry has it all together himself. Because when you get down to it, we didn't get an answer about whose morals we're going to follow. Let's just say tonight that we did give in and we let Larry have his way and dispense with God. Then what are we going to do? Who are we going to listen to? He did not even begin to answer that because we had three persons on the screen. We had Charles Rourke, we had Bob Lawson, and we had Larry. Now, I will admit I'd rather hang around with Larry than I would the other two of them, even though I like Charles all right, but I know Charles pretty well. Larry is much more calm and has better, I think, family ethics and things of that nature. And so, but still, at the end of the day, I saw that Larry would get into a scuffle with someone as a result of him pointing a finger in his face. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure that it really matters that Larry is calling God into question and saying, you know what, God, if you don't slam Satan, then I'm not going to believe in you. Our alternative is right here. We can go along with the scientists in their sophistry and say, you know what, nothing came from nothing, and the physics have figured it all out. Let me tell you something. Lawrence Krauss has not figured out much. I read his book as well, and it was a conglomeration of a lot of pooling of a lot of ignorant things, I think, that he can't prove, and I don't know why Richard Dawkins is acting as if they have actually proved everything by saying that nothing is actually unstable, and it just couldn't help but spring into something eventually. Folks, I know that we haven't covered every rock, uncovered every rock, looked under every rock, and gone to every link. But, you know, in a situation like this, sometimes you just have to do what you can do. My tactic for answering, handling the debate the way that I decided to was myself, from talking to a lot of persons who are in the field, I get tired of them always getting to debunk the Bible, always hitting on the Bible, and never giving us a system. I want you to remember, this is what I'll remember from the debate. Larry did not give us a system that we can use to stabilize ourselves if we get rid of the Bible. I expect that in another 40 years, when all the persons like myself and Larry die, who were brought up in religious homes, we're all gone, and all these young people who have been taught that there is no evil and no good and no purpose, when they run wild on this earth, I think we're really going to be sorry, and that's why I do what we do. We appreciate you for being with us tonight, and we tell you that you can have this DVD for free of charge. All you have to do is get in touch with me, 276-806-2150, or you can email me. And, you know, Larry, you don't have to really farewell. As far as a farewell wave, there's a great possibility that we'll stay in contact, and we may see Larry Serber again. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks,
appreciate
Johnny.
it very much.
Take it easy.
Good night, everybody.